Sorry about that. So I actually forgot to start the recording. I'll just do a brief overview of what I did there. Basically, all I've done so far is we've created a wireframe. So we used the extract edges up here, and we grabbed the top surface to grab our wireframe. From there, we used offset, and we just left clicked here, hold shift, left click again to create our offset arc. We hit OK from that, cancel. And then from there, we went ahead and selected that entity, right click, entity modify, and we changed the start angle from 0 to 360. Hit OK, and that's it. And then the square is pretty straightforward. So sorry about that. Yeah, I forgot to start the recording there. My bad. But that's basically where we're at right now. So that's basically the geometry selection. Again, there's not too much that you have to do with wire EDM. We just need a wireframe profile of the part, unless you get more into the 4-axis and where you would also want the top and the bottom, and potentially some tilt lines in between. But again, even that is technically you just need a wireframe for that as well. It would just be in the 3D space. So yeah, so that's basically how that works there. Now what I'm going to do is we'll kind of set this up to use the open features for wire EDM. So yeah, obviously I could go ahead and just select this profile, and we could do like an open or close, a inside or outside or whatnot. But I'm just going to use the open feature as well, just so you can kind of see how that works. And basically, we're just going to section off this and probably use this side and this side, just so you can kind of see how that works. So what I want to do first is basically we'll start off by just doing, for instance, from here to here, and we'll just do this little piece right here. And so when I hover my mouse over this entity, as you can see, that's one piece right there. That's one arc, and then that's another arc. And what I want to do is I want to start it in the center of this arc, actually, and then go all the way out to the end, and basically the center of this one, and lead out. And so basically what we need to do is we need to divide these arcs. And I also want to get a start and an endpoint location, basically kind of like where a pilot hole may be. So what we'll do first is we'll go ahead and try to create that pilot hole, that location here. So what I want to do is I want that hole to basically be perpendicular to this arc here. So I kind of want it to be like right here in the center. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to basically create a line. So we're going to go to Create 2D and then Line. And what we can do is we can utilize the snap points that show up like this, and these construction geometry lines that show up, those dotted lines there. So what we'll do is basically I'm hovering my mouse over this entity, and we have these 3 points that show up, 2 endpoints and a midpoint. And I'm going to click on the endpoint to start it right there. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to get a perpendicular line to that, which I actually am able to get that from hovering my mouse over the arc here, the main circle. And you can actually, I don't know if you guys can see it, but it's very faint. There's one already there that I can grab. So in this case, that's how we can get it. But yeah, basically you'll see a bunch of different construction geometry lines will show up, and they're basically just depending on, they're trying to lock on to other endpoints and midpoints of the other entities around. Sometimes it gets a little messy, but it is a good tool though for these kind of cases if you're trying to actually use them. If you don't care, if you don't want to use them, actually down here you can shut them off. So at the bottom right of the screen, there's a couple of toggles down here, and one is called Use Construction Geometry, and you just check it off. Just click on it, and that will disable it. There's a couple of other cool little tools down here that maybe I'll go over a little later. But let's go ahead and just move it down this construction geometry there. And you just click again to place it down. And then I just click OK and cancel. Then we'll do the similar thing down here as well. So I'll hover my mouse over it, click the midpoint, and then it's very faint, but it's right there. So I'm going to grab that, hit OK, and cancel. So now we've got our lines. And then what I want to do, I want to trim away this little bit because I'm only going to be working with this line here. So we'll go to Utilities, Quick Trim, and pretty straightforward. You just hover your mouse over where you want to trim away, and it will trim at that intersection. And same thing over here. And cancel. And then what we can do is I want to create a point along this line. Now there's a couple different ways you can do that. So if I go into Create 2D and Point, you can see there's a couple of different point options up here. So you can just leave it on the default one. In our case, if we just wanted right in the center, I can just hover my mouse over it and snap there. But you can also try some of these other ones out too, like if you didn't want it exactly in the center. For instance, if I go to point on entity, I can actually set up a percentage or a distance off of this line here. So in our case, I'll leave it set to 50%. But this is how you can basically create a point anywhere along the line and be more specific about where that's going to be along the line. Because obviously I could technically put it anywhere I want, like as an arbitrary value. But if you know exactly how much you want to be off of the line, then you can use this command here. So that's under point, and then it's called point on entity. So I'm going to keep it set to 50, and I'm just going to click on it. And as you can see, it automatically places it down. And I can hover my mouse anywhere along the entity, and it'll still stay at that 50% mark. And then I just hit cancel. And that's how we get the points right there. Now, the reason why I'm doing a point is because when I create this feature on the leads page, that's all I need to select as a point. You can create a circle there to kind of simulate, where the pilot hole would be or whatnot. But I really just need a point at the end of the day, so I'm not going to do anything extra there. I'm just going to create the points. Now, there's one last thing we have to do here, and that is this this arc, when I hover over it, it's still all one piece. And what I said before is I want to start right here and go all the way down to, and then end right here, and we'll exit like that. So we actually need to break these entities up here. And there's a really easy way to do that. So if you go to Utilities, you can see there's a couple of different break commands up here. And yeah, there's definitely a couple of different ways you can break it up. Like break divide is basically you divide it by, this is how many pieces you want it to be. Break entity is just if you want to just break one entity at an intersection. But breaks many is probably the one I use the most just because it's super easy to use. It basically just, all it does is it breaks up all entities at all intersections. And so when I go into break many, I'll basically just select these two entities and these two entities and then hit OK. And so what that does is it actually breaks it up at that intersection just like that. And so now we're left with two pieces. This is untouched because there was nothing to break there, but we have two pieces there and two pieces there. So a really quick way to break up, if I had this all along the entire model, I could just select the whole thing and then it would break it up at all the intersections. So it's a really quick way to do that. And that's basically it with the CAD for the most part there. So hopefully most of that made pretty good sense there. What I'm going to do now is I'm just going to get rid of this line and this line because I don't need it anymore. So now let's go ahead and start to make some toolpath for this here. So basically what we want to do is we'll go to the CAM tree here. And what I like to do is I like to work inside of the CAM tree almost exclusively. As you can see, we have like a CAM tab, and then once I actually load in my Wire EDM job and this CAM tree is active, you'll also see a wireframe, or sorry, a Wire EDM tab as well that you can create your toolpath and all that kind of stuff. But you can actually do all of that stuff already in the CAM tree itself, just by right-clicking on everything. So that's what I'm going to do in today's webinar here. So let's go ahead and just start a new job. So you can see there's little buttons up here. So you have, this one's just to start a new job. This one is to start a new job from a template that you've created, which we can get in more of that later. And then there's other options here like blanking stuff out and going to simulation and posting and all that kind of stuff. But you can do that other areas too. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to click on this button to start a new job. And then we'll go to Wire EDM. And then you can see you can select from a list of machines here, and there should already be some default machines in here. Otherwise, if you don't see your machine in here, what I recommend is going to our support site, BobCAD-CAM, and then there's a post processor tab that you can look through. And I think it'll say like download post processor. If you go to that tab there, that's where you'll actually find our default database of post processors on there. And so there'll be a wider selection of different Wire EDM machines on there that you can look up. And basically all it is it'll download an exe file. So just make sure the software is closed down first, but just run that exe file, and basically it'll install the machine into the software, and it will be a selectable entity in this list after that. But yeah, in our case, I'll just stick with whatever's here, that's fine. And then basically we're going to go through the stock wizard here to set up our job. So I'm going to click stock wizard, and then we're going to go through these different pages here. So the first page is workpiece. So if you had the solid model like we do, you can actually select that solid model. Now you don't have to do that, but basically I think it's really more for milling, not really Wire EDM too much, but basically what it's used for is to compare the stock with the model in the simulation, and you can see if there's any kind of gouging or any excess material. There's different kind of commands you can use in the simulation to basically do that, and you can see where the gouges are and stuff like that. So it kind of just works as a double check, you could say, in the simulation. Now, if you don't have the solid model, don't worry about it. You can just, leave it blank and just hit the next arrow. And then on this page is setting up our stock here. So there's definitely a couple different ways to do this. As you can see, default is just a rectangle. And you can see it's already created a default stock here. It just picks the max and mins of the solid model that we have selected there, as you can see. And that's how it's created it initially. But you can use these different types to set it up however you need to. So that's just a rectangle. And you can set up, as you can see, the dimensions and all that good stuff. And then you also have a cylinder. You have wireframe. So if you like, this is a wireframe. So I could just select that. Actually, I'll just show you real quick. If I just click on it, hit calculate stock, you can see it fits to that wireframe just like that. If you have a solid model of the stock, then you could just select that directly. So you just click on it and hit calculate stock, and it fits the stock to that exact model. If you have the STL model of it, you could actually browse through your computer for the STL model. And that comes more into play if you're using operation stock and mill, is when I would see where you would want to use that, but not really in our case here. Revolve, if you just have, and that's probably more for lathe, but I guess you could maybe use it in this case. But basically, that would just be if you just had like a profile that you wanted to revolve around. So for the most part, you'll stick with these first few up here. Rectangle. So if I calculate stock, that's the rectangle. Cylinder. And in our case here, I'll actually just go ahead and select our arc, which is already selected here, and hit calculate stock. And then down here, you can see you can actually set a top, like how high you want it to be, and you can set a height here. So if I'm looking at the side view, you can see it's set to 1. I'm not sure exactly how thick this is, but you can just change it right here if you need to. Maybe it's 1/2 inch. There we go. So you can set it up right there. And that's basically it. Pretty straightforward, honestly. So we'll just leave that as a stock. I guess one thing I might mention here is that I noticed that sometimes people get confused. They think they're setting up the machine origin on this page, or at least they think that's what they're referencing, but that's not the case. This page is only used to set up the stock and nothing else. You don't have to worry about, the machine origin just yet. You're just setting up the stock based off of this CAD origin, and that's it. So once you get everything set up, you just hit the next arrow, or the forward arrow here. And now this is the page where you set up that machine origin location. So I'll just leave it set to the default here, which is just the center middle. Basically, it's just the default is just 0, 0, 0 of the CAD origin. So depending on where this is placed in the CAD space here, the default is always just 0, 0, 0. So if you ever need to move it though, you use this page here. So if I click inside the origin box, basically, as you can see, it's actually already showed me some snap points that I can use. So you just click on it and you can see how it moves the origin. But yeah, I can basically move it to wherever I want to, or I could just type in the values if I know the values. And then also you can adjust the directions of the axes. So if I want the x-axis to go down here, down this line, I can select that line. And because of the right-hand rule, sometimes it goes on the opposite way, but you just have to use these reverse directions until you get it into the right orientation. You can also select a line that's parallel to it. So instead of selecting this one, I could select this line. And you can see it still shoots down the same path. And so that's how those directions work there. In our case, I'm just going to leave it back. I'm going to set it back to our 0, 0, 0. So I can actually just type in 0, 0, 0. And then just move the z-axis pointing upward, and we'll just leave it at that. Actually, I'll just go ahead and put the x direction back to the same exact. There we go. So that's how you can kind of move this around. And again, this is the machine origin. So this is the important part here. When you actually post out the code, it's going to be in reference to whatever you've set up here. So this page is very important. It's the machine setup page. So once we're done with setting that up, we're going to go OK. And now we've just completed our job setup there. One note I'll add there too. What you see here is the CAD origin. It's not the CAM origin. If you ever want to see the CAM origin for the job, just click on Machine Setup, and that will actually show the machine origin. Again, since we have the same one, you can see it's the exact same. But in other cases, it won't be the same. So just click on Machine Setup if you ever want to see your machine origin. So that's the basic job setup here. So now what we'll go ahead and do is we'll go ahead and create some toolpath here. So what I like to do is blank a bunch of stuff out that I don't need to see. So I'm just going to blank out this model here, the little eyeball there. I don't care to see the stock, so I like to blank that out. Over here, you can see there's a little eyeball over here too, to blank that out. And so now I'm ready to go with what I want to see. And just a side note with adjusting the views and stuff, you can hit Control or hold Control and basically cycle through the numbers to get the different views. So if I hold Control 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, so on, 7, cycles through the different views. And yeah, that's basically how that works. Pretty straightforward. Okay, so now let's go ahead and create some toolpath here. So what I'm going to do, again, I like to use the CAM tree. You can see there's toolpath up here that you can select the different ones up here. But I'm going to right click on machine setup, and I'm going to go to 2-axis open. And now it pulls up this wizard, and we basically we set up all of our toolpath inside of this wizard here. And when we're done, we can hit compute, and it will compute the toolpath for us. So first step is always going to be selecting your geometry. So I'll go select geometry. And using the same method we used before for our chain select, we'll go ahead and do that on this example here. So I'm going to click the first one to start it there. Then I'm going to go down to here. And if I hold shift, we need to be on this half of the entity, the furthest half. And I left click, and now we've got our chain here to here. And as you can see over here in our little dialog window here, selected geometry, you can see there's all the entities that got selected with that. And a note with here is whatever's orange is the thing that's active. So since this selected geometry is orange, that's when we're selecting our geometry. If I click into this box, now this is active, and this is the profile chains. And so this is just, you can see the different, I could have multiple chains selected in the same job or in the same feature here. In our case, we only have one chain. So you can see that one chain shows up, and it gets automatically generated based off of what you've selected. But basically this box is in here so you can see, well, first off, you can see how many chains are selected, but then also, you can see which direction they are going. So as you can see, it's starting from here and going that way. And then you can reverse that direction inside of here if you need to. So I'll just leave that set on that. And then also you can see down here is an opportunity to set up some stop points if you need to. So, if you need it to stop along the geometry before it gets to the end, you would just basically create a point and select that as a stop point. In this case, first here, I'm not going to do that. So I'm just going to leave that blank, and I'm going to hit OK. And so that's an important step there, is selecting geometry. So once we've done that, we can hit next. And we can just basically go through the list here. Now, in this, I'll go kind of quick through here because there's not too much that we're going to really need to change. But in this example here, I don't have a glue stop. So I'm just going to leave that set to no glue stop for this example here. And then we'll hit next. In this example, I just want to show the rough cut. But as you can see, you can set up, a rough cut and some skims. You can also get some tab cuts if you're using an inside or outside here that you can add to it. But in our case, I just want to utilize the rough cut just for an example here. And then I'll hit next. This is just a list of your wire parameters. So there's nothing I need to change here. I'm going to hit next. Again, nothing here. And this is the machining sequence page. So if you had multiple chains selected, then you can basically decide the order of that. We only have one chain selected, so I'm just going to hit next. Then we have this page here, the parameters page. So default, you can see it's selected. System compensation is off, and then you'll get a G41 output. But you can also do G42 if you want to as well. In the inside and outside, it'll just say on or off. And, that's just because you're just going to get, a 41 or a 42 depending on if it's inside, outside. But in the opened, you can pick which one you want to pick here. So I'm going to leave it set to G41, or you can just have it run off and it'll just run right down the center of the geometry that you've selected. And there is a way to save some of these defaults. If you always set it to the same thing every time, there is a way to save defaults. There's a button right here. So if I click on Save Defaults, and basically, I could do a new template. If you modify the current, I don't recommend modifying the current template because this is like the system default. So I would recommend making a new template and naming it whatever you want to name. I'll just say example wire EDM. And basically, when you check off this button here, save feature information, it's going to save different things that you have set as a default, essentially. So, if you uncheck, let's say just for instance, you just always uncheck apply stop points because you don't use them. Then when I save this out, as long as I've done that first and then I hit save, it's going to save that information. And I can always pull up this template when I'm initially starting the job, and it will already be unchecked off. So it's just a way to save defaults inside of the CAM wizard, basically. So if I just hit save, then we're already saved. So it's going to retain any information. So technically, if you want to, you can go ahead and change everything first and then do that at the last step, because it's going to save everything in this feature. There's a couple of scenarios where it's not going to save stuff, like the tool information, because the tool information is a whole separate thing. But for the most part, a lot of these buttons in here, like these toggles and these drop down boxes and stuff, that's the kind of stuff that it will save. And then like this, if you have a list of different options, that's the kind of stuff it would save as a default. So as you can see here, we're on to the next page, the corner types. Nothing much really to change here. I don't really ever have to change this page, but it does give you a couple other options to handle the corners, essentially. If you want to try to use like a loop radius to try to get a really sharp corner or something like that. But for the most part, I just leave that set to sharp. And then the leads page, this is an important page here. So this is how we're controlling the lead in and lead out areas. And so in our case here, we are actually going to utilize those points that we've created on this page. So as you can see, lead in, lead out, and you can keep the same lead in and lead out. In our case, we're not going to do that because we're going to have two separate lead in and lead out locations. So I'll uncheck that. But as you can see, if I do a drop down box here, we've got a couple of different types of lead ins. So we've got circular, and you can kind of see in this graphic up here. So it basically adds an arc with a line as a lead in, and then if you also want to do that with the lead out, same thing, arc with a line. Then you have perpendicular blend, so very similar to that, except it's more of a blend in instead of just a harsh arc. Oops. Then you've got perpendicular, which you just, this red is the line, and it's just a straight line into the profile. And parallel is the same, except for like this, more of this kind of a case. It's just a line. And then you've got the select point and point blend. And so we're going to actually use select point in our case here. And basically this just allows us to define the exact location where you want it to start. So again, if you had the example of a pilot hole, you can start right from the center of that hole as our start point location. So if I hit select point, and then you can see, you can either just type it in, and most of the time you won't know the exact number, so just hit pick points, and then you would pick your start. So this is for our lead in, because I believe we went down this path. So I'm going to do that point right there. And then our lead out, it's not going to be the same because it's a different location. If it was the same, then it would be the same exact location. So we uncheck that. Then we go to select point, pick point, and pick that bottom point there, and hit OK. And then as you can see right here that they're two different locations. So that's what I want there. So now I'm going to hit next. And then we get to our cutting conditions page. Cutting conditions, can be set up different ways. A lot of people just set these up at the machine and just leave everything 0 inside the software, set it up at the machine. But you can also utilize the values in here. So you can just set up the cutting conditions inside of this page here and have it post out with the numbers that you set here. One thing to note about this is that you see it says link to database. And that's because we do have some cutting conditions, some machines that do have a cutting conditions database that was installed into the system when you installed the software. And so you can try to utilize those databases to try to autofill this info in. Um, the problem with that, though, is that, you know, those databases will need to be updated as years go on, and we don't have that updated information. So, we won't necessarily have exactly what you need inside of those databases. So a lot of times what I recommend is just setting it up on this page. And then what you can do actually is you can save out this feature with the cutting conditions already in it, and that way you don't have to remember each time. Otherwise, you just type it in each time. But if you see right here, it says edit table. So this is actually like the cutting conditions table inside of the software here. And so as you can see, we have 2-axis rough cut. And that's just because that's all that we have in this feature. If I had, you know, a bunch of different operations inside of here, then they would show up on this page as well. And you can just go through this table and set up all the values just straight inside of this table here. And then that's how you can do it instead of doing it right here. And so that's like one of the things that you can kind of do to set it up inside the software here. Otherwise, again, just set it up at the machine. It's just depending on, your kind of workflow and what works easier for you. So in my case, I'm just going to leave this all default here and hit compute. And now you can see there's our toolpath. So it's that light green color, and these darker blue colors are the lead in and lead outs. So that's what it looks like. And then if I kind of pivot that, you can kind of see the toolpath in 3D form as well. So if you did have like 4-axis toolpath, then you'd be able to see what it looks like. And there's a couple of different ways you can actually simulate this. One is to just enter into simulation, but sometimes it's easier to just see it inside of this graphics area without doing that. And so the way to do that is you just right-click on the operation and make sure you're actually right-clicking on the operation and not like the feature. So this is like a feature, and these are operations that are inside of the feature. And so this backplot feature is going to be dependent upon the actual operation. So if I just right-click on 2-axis rough cut, then we see it says backplot right here. Again, it won't show up right here. There's no backplot that'll show up under the feature. It'll just show up under this operation. So it's right here, backplot. And then what you can see here is, kind of a simulation of the path that it's going to take. So I'm just going to go to hold Control and press 1 to go back to my top view here. And we basically get this red line that can kind of indicate the path here. So you have this whole dialog that shows up over here. I just like to click through it like this, just to get a sense of, the direction it's going and make sure everything looks good there. So everything looks good, so I just cancel it out of that. And that's basically one way you can kind of set up your toolpath there. So hopefully that kind of makes sense. I know I've showed you guys quite a bit so far, so again, just let me know if you have any questions on that. But I'm going to go ahead and move on to the next feature now. So the next case, these other features are just going to be similar ways, to create the features, but just doing it slightly differently. So what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to just go ahead and load in a template that I've already pre-made for this, that already has the features in there, and then I'll just show you the different things that were changed on those features. But I guess first what I'll do is I'll show you how I actually even saved out that template. And this is something that you can utilize if you're always using the same features every time, and you just want to save a little time. That took us some time to actually set up this job, right? So it helps kind of eliminate some of that time that you had to spend setting up the job, and a lot of it will already be pre-done for you. So I guess what I'll start off by saying is there's a couple of different ways you can save out defaults. So the first one was, again, inside of this wizard, we had this save defaults button down here. And that saves out defaults, for this wizard specifically. But there's other ways to save out defaults. The other way is to save out a default, well, a template, I guess you could call it. I kind of call them the same thing. But save out a template of this entire job here. So even if I had a bunch of different features or whatnot, once you get everything set up the way you want, what you can do is you right click on Wire EDM job, and then you go to Save as Job Template. And so what I can do here is basically it saves this .w job file, which is located under the BobCAD-CAM data, V34, technology, templates, CAM job. It should already be set up, but this is the file path where these are going to be located. And so I'll just say example test, I guess, and hit save. And so what that did is that saved out this job essentially. So for instance, I'm going to just blank that out for a second. So as you can see, when we loaded a new job, we click this button. But if you go one over to that, this says create a new job from a template. You'll click this one instead. And we're going to the Wire EDM job type. And as you can see here, there's our example test template. So you can still hit Stock Wizard and go through the setup just to verify everything looks good. I'm just going to hit OK for now. And as you can see, it goes ahead and populates the job. So it even populates the feature that we've created. There's our rough cut. And really the only thing that I would recommend here is just verify that your machine setup is in the right order, in the right location. Verify that your stock looks what you want it to be. And if it's not, then you can simply just right click on it, go to Stock Wizard and edit it. But the main thing that you have to do is you just have to reselect geometry for this job. So this little red plus here that you see, this is telling me that there's nothing selected for that. And that there doesn't have to be something selected for everything. So you can see there's stop points. It also has a red plus, but that doesn't mean I have to select a stop point. That's just saying that I don't have one selected. But you do always need a geometry selected for the feature. So when I right click on geometry, reselect, now I can go back, go from here to here, make sure my chain direction looks good, hit OK. And now if I just go ahead and compute toolpath, now you can actually see there's our toolpath that just got created. So it's a really quick way to do that, and it definitely comes in handy. So that, again, to make that was right click on the job and you would go save as job template. So that's the second type of default that you can save in the software. And the last type is just to save the entire file. And so to do that, I would go to File, and then under New, you can see down here, it says Save Template. So if I hit Save Template, and then I just call it whatever, we'll just say Wire EDM Example, and hit Save. Now you can see under User Templates, it shows up right here. And so this one just saves absolutely everything in the file. All your job information, all of your geometry and everything like that. So when I open that up, if I just double click on it, as you can see, there's our two jobs. Geometry is already selected, toolpath's already there, and everything is in place. So it essentially just saves out the entire file as a template. So hopefully that kind of made sense there. So what I'm going to do here is I'm just going to use that template for an example here. So I'm going to, again, go to the second one over right here. So create a job, new job from a template. And we're going to go to Wire EDM. And here it is right here, Wire EDM. And I'm just going to go ahead and hit OK there. And this is my other examples here that I have. So this was the first one that I just did already. I'll go ahead and reselect our geometry for that. And I may have to reset up, oops, sorry. I may have to reset up the lead in and lead out, but we'll see. I'll just go this way so we're staying consistent. And actually, I'm just going to go ahead and edit this and just fix it just to make sure this looks good. So, oh, and by the way, in 34, you can now just double click on things in the CAM tree to load them up. So I think before, you just right click and hit edit, right? So, but now you can just double click on it, and then it loads right up. So we're going to go to the leads page. Let's just select point for our lead in. And yeah, see, it's slightly different. So I'm just going to clear out whatever's in there, select that point, hit OK. And then for our lead out, pick points, clear out whatever was in here, select this point, hit OK. Now we hit compute, and there's our toolpath again. Perfect. So that's the first one. This next example here is utilizing a rough cut and a tab cut. And so basically, this is one way that you can essentially not have the rough cut the entire thing out, right? You can use this tab cut as to basically stop it or whatnot. So I'm going to go and do that on the other side here. And I think what I want to do in this example is what you can do is you can actually set up your lead-ins ahead of time, basically, if you want to. Typically, I like to just stick with that page, that leads page, to create everything. But sometimes it does come in handy to actually create them ahead of time. At least definitely in this example. I wouldn't always recommend that for sure. But in this example, what I want to do is I want to try to start the wire from the outside of our cylinder and come in like that. And so it's going to be the same process that we used before to create that line. So we just go to create 2D line, hover my mouse over here, select the midpoint, and we should see a snap point show up. There it is. We'll just run it down that line there, hit OK, cancel. Actually, I don't have to cancel. I could have just kept that open. For this one down here, we'll do the same thing. Have it run down this path here. Hit OK, cancel. And then we'll break up the entities. So again, we go to Utilities, Break Mini, select those two, hit OK and cancel. And now you can see those are divided up again. And so now we're basically back to where we were initially on the other side. And so what I'm going to do now is, again, we're just utilizing a rough cut and tab cut here. So what I'll do first is I will go ahead and just select what we have before. So reselect, and we'll go from here down to here. And then when I click inside the profile chains, you can see the direction it's going, so that looks good. So then I'll hit OK. And as you can see, now the red plus went away, so we've got our geometry selected for this feature here. And let's just go ahead and go inside of this this wizard here so we can see what was changed. So you can see on this page, instead of, before we didn't use a glue stop. Well, now we are using a glue stop, but we're doing it without leads. So let's just see what this result shows us. So I'm just going to leave everything default. Let's just hit compute. And let's just see what this gives us. So see how you don't see anything yet, and that's just because it's blanked out here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to unblank it so we can see what it looks like. And sometimes actually what I like to do is I do like to have everything blanked out. And then if you just click on the individual operation, it just shows you the toolpath that's created for that operation. So you can see when I click on 2-axis rough cut, you can see the geometry that's, the toolpath that shows up. And then if I go to the tab cut, you can see the tab cut. So basically the way this works is, it just leaves a tab left over to be cut when I'm using that glue stop. And if I go back to that page, you can see there's a distance that you can set up. So right now it's just set to 0.1. So I'm just going to make it over exaggerated so you can see what happens. I just make this 1 and hit compute. Now you can see if I hit the rough cut, now you can see it's starting way down here now. And then the tab cut finishes from that location. And so that's how you can kind of adjust it, if you need it to stop at that location or whatnot. And then after this, I'm going to show you another way to do that, and that's just to use the stop points. But you can do it this way as well if you want to. And it works, I think it works a little better for like the actual inside or outside examples, where you can really see that more come into play. But you can see you can also do it in the open as well. And basically the differences between those are the open this is open geometry. In other words, the geometry that I'm selected here is open-ended. They don't connect together. So it's just starts over here and it ends over here. If I wanted to use the inside or outside, then that would be like selecting this entire piece here. And then that's how, because this is all one connected chain together. There's no point that's disconnected essentially. And that's when you would use the other two. So hopefully that clears that up a little bit there. But yeah, so this example, again, very similar to the other example. The only difference is we've added in a tab cut. So on that machining strategy, we've just added in a second operation. And then you just go through it just like normal. You still set up your machine compensation if you need to. You still have all these other pages. We still set up our lead in and lead out locations. So this was actually just pulling from the default that I had before, but it's the same process of picking a point where you want it to start and leading in. And you have your cutting conditions. And then for the tab cut, same thing. So you'll have your machine setup, you'll have your leads page, and stuff like that. And one thing to note as well is if I go back to my first page here, we used use glue stop without leads. So that just means at that end point where that glue stop is, as you can see, it just stops right on the profile. It doesn't like there's no, I guess, exit, you could say. It just stops right on the profile. But you can actually, if you don't want that, you can actually set a use glue stop with leads, and then it will go off of whichever you set on these pages here. So you do see that it does add a lead in, but it's just at that location of the glue stop. That's where that would come into play. So this lead out, nothing, you can set it up to whatever you want and nothing will change because again, we're doing without leads. And so this lead out does not come into play in that case. And then similar with the tab cut for the lead in, it doesn't matter what you have set here because we've turned off without leads. But again, if you need to set up leads, then you would just do with leads. And then the first option that I did at the very first feature was just no glue stop at all. We just had it run the entire profile down. So those are kind of the three differences between those. And the distance is just, the distance that glue stop will be. And in our case, it's going to be from the end to, following 1 inch along the profile. So that's kind of how those work there. So again, this one was just a rough cut with a tab cut. And then this last one here is going to be very similar, except it's going to be stop points. We're going to use the stop points button. So let's go ahead and make that now. So with this one, again, it's very similar process. We're just going to also utilize the stop points button. So let's go ahead and do that. So we already have the feature created. Everything is basically the same, except I'm doing no glue stop in this case. So I'm going to leave everything default. We're just going to right click on geometry and hit reselect. And we're going to go from here, hold shift, left click here. There's our chain, so I'll hit OK, looks good. And I'm not going to put stop points on it first. Let's just see what it looks like. And that's one method I kind of recommend a lot of times is, I don't try to do everything all at once. I try to stick with the basic things first. And then I'm like, okay, now I'm going to add a stop point. So now I'll go back and add my stop point, just make sure. I want to make sure that the basic toolpath looks good first. And then I go back and add in all the extra stuff that I want to add in. Because a lot of times, if you might not realize that the initial toolpath that gets created is not what you wanted. And you may be thinking, oh, maybe it has something to do with the stop points that I selected, but really, you just have to go back and look at the other features. So that's kind of how I personally like to do it. But let's go ahead and just compute this toolpath now and see what we get. So in this example, so in this example, I just still have just the rough cut. So you can see our toolpath. Now, I guess I was going to show a scenario where we just follow this line, but I just realized I don't really need to do it in this case, so I'm not going to. But you could add, if you don't want to use the lead-ins, you can just turn them off and add in this line and this line into the geometry selection, and then it'll just continue to follow along those lines. But yeah, again, in our case, we're not going to worry about that. So as you can see, again, this dark blue is the lead-in. Then we're going to this green, which is the actual profile, and then this dark blue is the lead-out. So as you can see, it's just all one continuous toolpath. So now what we're going to do is we're just going to add in a stop point. So one thing to note about this, actually, I guess it's not in this case. Let me see just to make sure. Okay, right here. On the parameters page, make sure this is set to apply stop points. Otherwise, you won't get any, basically. So just make sure it's checked off on the parameters page. But yeah, basically what I'm going to do is same thing with the geometry selection, except for stop points here. I'm going to right click on stop points, hit reselect. And as you can see, it just pulls up that geometry selection page that we initially saw when we created the feature. So you could actually already set this up right away if you want to. If you know exactly where it's going to be, you can set that up right away if you want to. Or you can just go into it like I just did here. And now you can see this orange, this is highlighted, so this is what's active. So we're going to set our stop point. I'll just do it right here, for instance. So I'll just pick that point and hit OK. And now I'm just going to go ahead and recompute the toolpath. So to do that, you just right click on the feature, and you can see right here it says compute all toolpath. And what that's done now is that's added a stop point to that location. So if I actually run this toolpath here, and maybe I should have picked a point that wasn't right on the edge, but that's okay. Let's just do a back plot of this. So again, there's our lead in. I'm just going to back plot through this just to see what it looks like. And what you'll notice here is it stops right there. So that's the stop point. And then in the code, you would see your actual, and with the code, always verify the code. But yeah, you should see a stop point in the code. So you should see like your MOO. But then, yeah, just keeps going on. And that's basically it. So pretty straightforward. You know, both of these examples kind of work the same, except I believe the rough cut with the tab would actually give us an extra stop at the end of the tab. And just to verify that, let's go ahead and post this out. So what I'm going to do is, if I hit post right now, it's going to post the whole job. But what I want to do is I just want to post this feature here. So just right click on the feature itself and hit post. And that should actually just post out this example. Let's see. That didn't actually post out. Let me see here. Yeah, it should be just this one. Hang on a second. Let's see. It should be posting, so let me give that another shot here. Okay, I'm not sure what that happened. That was weird. It should just post right away. So you just right click on the feature itself and hit post. And I don't know why I didn't the first time, but it should just post right away. So again, you just right click on the feature. So I could go to this one and right click on this one. Let's see what we get for this post first. So as you can see, there's the MOO for the stop. So the end of the rough cut with no leads. So it's stopping right there. And then it's doing the tab cut, and then there's another stop. So now let's just post out just this bottom one here. So right click post. And we get a similar result. It's doing the profile of the part, and then it's adding the stop right there, and then it's finishing out. So basically, as you can see, very similar code there. So that's just a couple of different ways to do the same kind of thing as far as that goes. So hopefully that makes a lot of sense there. There's only one more scenario that I'm going to go through. So if you guys do have any other questions, again, just let me know in the questions there. But I'll just go ahead and, if not, I'll just go ahead and go to the next example here. So far what we've covered today, we've covered the CAD, most of the Create 2D section there. So we've extracted the wireframe off of a solid model using extract edges. After that, we have used the offset command to offset some geometry. So we offsetted this arc. And then we just got that little segment. So from there, we modified that segment and turned it into a full arc. And then from there, we went ahead and made a rectangle just to show an example of another stock you could create for it. And after that, we also showed how to create these points right here. And what we did was we went to line. We just kept it to the default line. We didn't try any of these other ones, but by the way, you can. We just kept it to the default one. We selected the midpoint of the geometry. You hover your mouse over this arc to grab this construction geometry line, just like that, to snap it. Then we trimmed away that bit and put the point right in the center. And that's how we got most of our CAD stuff. And then from there, we went ahead and made a new job for Wire EDM. We set up an open feature, and we used the chain select to actually start from one side and select all the way to the other end, and selected a partial chain. And then we utilized the points that we've created to create our lead in and lead out. And after that, then we showed how to utilize tab cuts or stop points to actually further modify our toolpath. So that's basically what we've covered so far. The last thing I'm going to cover is just the same kind of thing, just a different kind of example here. So to basically create this little keyway here, I'm going to do a very similar process, except I'm just going to modify. I think this is actually more of the example I was going to do, is to modify the lead in and lead out into actual geometry that we can select. And there's a reason that I'm going to do that. So I'll show that here in a second. But hopefully most of this was pretty helpful to you guys. This is recorded. I missed the small beginning there, but you know, you'll be able to go to support@bobcad.com, and once they get everything uploaded, it should be on there as well. So this should be a recorded session here. All right, so let's go ahead and just finish up the last feature here if nobody else has any questions there. So basically we're going to create some toolpaths for this geometry here. So I'm just going to close up all of this nonsense that we have here. Get rid of that job. Close that up. So we've got this last feature here that I've done. And again, the actual parameters in here are going to be all basically the same. But basically what I'm doing here is the glue stop is the main thing. So in this example, we have use glue stop without leads. So in this example, the reason why I'm kind of doing that is because what I want to do is I still want a stop, but I don't want it to stop right on the profile. So what we can do here is we can go ahead and manually create the lead-in. So what I'll do is I'll go to create 2D line, and I'll go ahead and start from here, and you can kind of see it already, but there's the construction geometry that showed up, and I just left click again to place it down. Now that it's placed down, I can go ahead and modify the length. So I think I'll just do maybe an 1/8 inch as this example here. So I'll just type in an 1/8 inch there. And by the way, most of these dialogues here, you can do math in them. So I could do like 1 divided by 8 and hit tab on my keyboard. And as you can see, it goes ahead and does the math for me. So, you know, divide, multiply, add, subtract. So you can do that all in there. So I'll just do 1 divided by 8 and hit OK. And then we'll just do the same thing. So without canceling out, I can just go ahead after I've hit OK. Also, by the way, you can hit spacebar instead of OK. But after I've done that, I'm going to hover my mouse over here, click there. Again, click, actually, we could utilize that, that construction geometry as well to just place it down. And as you can see, it's already got the 1/8 inch, so that's good. So I'll hit OK and cancel. So now I've basically made my my lead in and lead out. Technically, it's not a lead in and lead out, by the way. It is just part of the geometry. So there still will be a lead in and lead out that we will add. So what I'm going to do actually is I'll just make a point just to kind of represent like a pilot hole location. And we'll just place it right here. One thing I want to note too with this is you can see, again, at the bottom, remember I said there's construction geometry that I can turn off and on. Well, another button down here is called Enable Disable Snap. And what you kind of notice when, you know, let's just say I'm just, you know, in this point command and I'm dragging my mouse around, you can see it kind of looks, I don't know the word for that, but it's kind of staticky, I guess you could say. It's not like free flowing. And that's because it's snapping at increments of this value that's down here. So it's snapping at those increments to place the point down. So that's why you can kind of see it doing that. But, you know, if you get to more into the RT kind of stuff, then you may actually want to disable that down there. And then as you can see, it's kind of free flowing. So I could disable that. a lot of times, like when I'm using like Bob art and stuff like that, that's when I would get into this, but you just disable those and it just makes it a lot easier to place them down in a kind of an arbitrary location. But in our case, it actually kind of works in our benefit a little bit because it snaps right on the y-axis there, and I can just place it right there. So just a little note about some of the buttons down there. So I'll hit OK, cancel. Okay. So now we've got most of our geometry created. So now what we'll do is we'll go back to the CAM tree. And again, we already have this set up. It's going to be a rough cut and then a tab cut to finish off. The only difference with this one, again, is that I've added in these additional geometry, lead in and lead outs, you can say it. So that way I can have it stop off of the profile using the glue stop. So what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and select our geometry like normal. So I'm going to select all our geometry like that. And as you can see, before what I said is you can hold shift and left click to chain around it. In this case, you can do that, that's fine. But there's other ways to select too, like just dragging your box over the geometry, and it's just going to select everything that's inside of that box. So sometimes that works a little bit easier to select things. But once I've selected everything, again, I can go down to my profile chains, and you can see here, this is the direction of the chain. So I can just reverse it again if I want to, but I'm going to leave it set to that path. And I'm not going to do anything else yet. I'm going to just hit OK. And let's just go ahead. No, I think it'll already do it because I already have it set up. But actually, what I'll do, let me just say no glue stop for a second. Hit compute. So this is just the basic toolpath that we get without doing anything there. So when I backplot this, we can kind of see the path that it takes. And so again, let's make a, now you could make a stop point, but I think I want to try to use the glue stop first here. So let's go ahead and modify this geometry. And I'm just going to set this on use glue stop without leads. Select that option. I'll leave it to the default of 0.1 for now and hit compute. And so we get this example here where, because we don't have the tab cut, it doesn't go all the way down. So let me just add in that tab cut. I'm not sure why it disappeared there. Add the tab cut back in. So here it is down here. I'm going to leave all this default. I'm not going to change anything for now and just hit compute. There we go. So now we have the rough cut and the tab cut. So this is one way that you can do it. Again, this is without using stop points. So we have our rough cut and we have our tab cut. And what I also want to do is I want to have our lead in and lead out of both cases on this point here. So again, we're going to go back to edit the rough cut here. Then I'm going to go down to the leads page. And we're going to go ahead and set up our lead in here. So it's going to be set to select point. And I'm going to go pick points. I'm going to clear out whatever's in here and pick this point. Hit OK. And without changing anything, let's just hit compute to see what that did. So I've computed, and now you can see now it's starting there. So now I also want it to end there as well. As you can see in the tab cut, it doesn't end there. That's because we just left it to the default. So now we'll do the same thing. So I'll edit the tab cut. Again, I double clicked on there to open it up really quick. Then I go to leads. And in this case, this is dealing with the lead out. We don't have to worry about the lead in because that's, again, on this page here, it's without leads. So the lead in for the tab cut does not come into play, just this lead out. So I uncheck the box for lead out, go to select point, pick a point, and pick that location. Hit OK, and then hit compute when you're done. And now we get our tab cut that does the same thing, goes to the same location. And so now we have our geometry, we have our rough cut. If you backplot that, we're starting from our pilot hole, we're going all the way across the part. We're stopping right here off of the part. Then we have our tab cut that finishes up from there. So then we have the tab cut that starts at that location and then just finishes back to the pilot hole. So that's one way you could do it. And then the other way would be to just use the stop point again. So if you want to just do the rough cut, you'd select the same geometry and you would just select a stop point that's right at that location. And if you want to decide where that location is, it's really easy with the stop points because it's just where you place it, right? But with the in this case here, it's just controlled by this distance right here. So since we have it set to 0.1, it's 0.1 from the end of this entity up. So if I make this like, let me exaggerate it again, do like ½ inch, hit compute. Now you can see it's like all the way in the center of the profile there. So that's how you can kind of move that around to your liking there. So I'm just going to set that back, hit compute, and now you can see it's back there. And yeah, after you get all the toolpath that you want, then you just post out the code. So to do that, there's just a little button up here. So it's the first button, or the furthest button over, is post and save as. So if I click that, it's going to immediately save the file. What I personally like to do is I like to see the code first before I save. So I'll go the one to the left over, click that. And then as you can see, it shows up in the posting window here. And you can just verify everything make sure everything looks good. And then once you're happy with it, just right click inside of here and you can save as, or if you want to make any minor edits to the code, you can go to NC Editor. And this is an editor app that's part of BobCAD to where you can actually edit the code. So those are kind of the two options. So, if I'm happy with it, I just hit save as, and then I save it to wherever. And that's that. Now you can also, if you're doing like RS-232, then you would actually load the NC editor there. And from there, you can actually pull up the dialog for that. And that's actually on my other window. Let me see if I can show that. Hang on a second. Let's see. Hang on, it says stopped. Let's see what's going on here. Oh, there we go. I think it was just being slow. Okay. So when I right-clicked inside of the posting window and I hit NC Editor, this NC Editor application will show up. And basically from in here, this is where you can actually make any modifies to the post. And when you're done, you can save out in here if you want to just save it to like a flash drive and send it to your machine. Or if you want to use RS-232, you just go to the Tools tab and you go to Start DNC Transfer. And then this is where you would actually go ahead and enter in the settings based off of your machine. By the way, there's two areas that you want to do this. One is inside of here and the other is in the device manager of your computer. So under the port settings in the device manager of your computer, you want to set up those same settings in there as well. So that is kind of an important note there. Make sure that you have those both correct. But that's basically where you would actually send the data to the machine. So hopefully that makes sense. Let me just go back to BobCAD there. But yeah, that's basically all that I had today to show you guys. We covered quite a bit with the CAD and the actual toolpath there. So if you guys have any other questions about this part or anything like that, just let me know. If you ever have any issues with the software, you can always also give us a call. And I'm a tech guy again, so you may even get me. Yeah, hopefully that was educational to you guys. I'll stick around for a little bit and see if anyone has any questions, but if not, I hope you guys all have a great rest of your day there.